Ghosts, goblins, and ghouls beware, for the black cat is everywhere, stalking quietly in the shadows, counting down the moments to the witching hour with each step. A distant shriek echoes through the cool night air. Something brushes past your leg and sends a shiver up your spine. Deep in the library of this haunted hilltop house, a candle burns late this evening, for he is seeking the answers to the questions that time forgot, and telling twisted tales of terror and mystification sure to keep you awake all night. Now, the clock strikes midnight, and here is Black Cat.
Greetings, viewer. Thank you for joining me this evening. Tonight is kind of a special occasion. This is the first collaboration I have done in the library. Inspector Legrasse will be by later to share some spooky stories with us. Tonight, I've selected a special book from my shelf of legendary creatures. I'd like to talk about vampires. Now, vampires as we know them from popular books and the silver screen arose from Eastern European legends, but almost every culture around the world has a vampire-like creature of their own. In fact, there are actually several different types of vampires. Let's take a look at them. Up first, sanguinarians. These are just humans who feed on blood for either pleasure or medical reasons. Number 2, psychic vampires. They're also human beings, but they drain psychic energy from the people around them instead of feeding on blood. Number 3, modern vampire-human hybrids. These beings look like humans, but they have vampire-like tendencies. And the vampire gene weakens with every new generation. And finally, the true or original vampires. It's not clear how vampires came to be, but these creatures are pure vampire. I've read that there are no original vampires left, but there's no way of knowing for sure. In this video, I'd mainly like to focus on the original vampires and the vampire-human hybrids. There are a few legends that correspond to the creation of the original vampires. In Christianity, one such legend states that Abel was turned into the first vampire after being killed by Cain as a way of extending his short life. Conversely, there is a similar legend in which Cain becomes the first vampire as a punishment. My personal favorite, however, tells of Lucifer creating the first vampire. Here's an excerpt from the Vampire Handbook. After Lucifer tricked Eve, God grew angry with him. A war among the angelic hordes broke out, and though Lucifer was a mighty archangel, he lost. God struck down Lucifer and his followers, creating a place of desolation for them to spend eternity. Lucifer vowed revenge, so he took up soil and created his own version of man. It looked, walked, and talked exactly like Adam, but Lucifer could not bring life to his creation, because only God could create life. So Lucifer went around God and gave his creation the ability to steal life from Adam, Eve, and the other humans. Lucifer's creation drank blood, because blood is the life. When God saw this abomination, he raised his hand to strike it down, but Gabriel intervened. "Father," Gabriel pleaded, "this creature knows not good nor evil. It only does what it needs to do in order to survive." God saw the truth in Gabriel's words, so instead of striking down Lucifer's creation, God enhanced the being. Now it could create its own family from humans who wished to join it. The creation also received a name, though that name is lost to time. God told the creation that it could come to heaven after its death. Lucifer raged at God's mercy and tried to kill his own creation, but God prevented Lucifer from taking his revenge, giving Lucifer's creation enough power to survive on its own for all eternity. Still another legend states that Lilith was Adam's first wife, but left him for Lucifer to become the first vampire and the queen of death and demons. Aside from the biblical references, There are a plethora of theories, including nanobots introduced into the human population by scientists or reptilians turning the humans immortal. Perhaps Atlanteans created vampires by mistake while experimenting on human biology to prolong life. What if aliens somehow created vampires in a sort of invasion of the body snatchers scenario? Anything is possible, and no theory is too bizarre to be considered. Vampire physiology is still primarily left to speculation. Vampires can create other vampires by biting them. Additionally, we assume that vampires can reproduce sexually as humans do. This is most likely due to the amount of human DNA that modern vampires have. It's unclear whether or not the original vampires could reproduce in this way as well. Modern vampires, indistinguishable from your average human, may have retractable fangs, aversion to sunlight and garlic, and increased athleticism. These traits are general and may not apply to every vampire. Again, it's unclear if the original vampires had these traits or were more beast-like in appearance and ability. There are many different legends, theories, and stories about different kinds of vampires from around the world. Unfortunately, there are way too many to cover in this short video. But I encourage you to research them, as many of the stories are extremely interesting.
And now, I have a special surprise for you. Inspector Lagras is going to share a few true vampire encounters with us. But first, he's brought in quite an interesting specimen. A live, original vampire. This is unprecedented, folks. Let's take a... What's that sound? Ah! Wow, that was incredible. They'll never let us show that on YouTube. I can't believe it got loose and chased us around the set. So much blood. Man, killing a vampire is a lot harder than it looks in the movies. Whew, what a pain in the neck, am I right? Anyway, I'll let Inspector Lagras take over while I catch my breath.
Years ago, when I was 18, my best friend and I had gone to the Zen Music Festival in Miami. It started at 10 p.m., I believe. It was an outdoor arena, seeing as it was essentially a rave. People weren't really going to be showing up till around midnight. There wasn't much to do, so my friend and I were just chatting away from the stage. There was no one else around that we knew of. Out of nowhere, someone tapped on my shoulder. We turned around to find a woman that appeared to be in her early 20s. She started some basic chit-chat, and I noticed she had fangs. Not too unusual. You tend to see things like that at raves or fetish parties. I did take notice after a few minutes that there was no way that they were just plastic tooth caps. Of course, if she really committed to impersonate a vampire, she could have had dental surgery to give her nice long fangs. Who knows? Anyhow, she was very formal while speaking, and I felt very uncomfortable around her. Don't know why. I find it easy to talk to pretty much everyone if approached, but there was something not right about her in general. She pulled out a little pamphlet that showed you how to do heroin. We gave it back to her, and she asked if we wanted to come to an after party her group was holding. We declined, but she gave us the address anyway. We turned back to the direction we had originally been facing. We both comment that the whole situation was odd, and I looked back to see if she was still nearby, but she was just gone. We weren't near any groups of people for her to disappear into. No bathrooms, no exits. Not even 15 seconds had passed, and she was just gone. Although having no intention of going to the party, we did decide to drive by the address she gave us, just to take a look. It was a rather large 2-story house. Our guess was that it probably had 6 bedrooms or so. All the lights were on. No one seemed to be there, and there was someone sitting on the roof. Obviously, we kept on driving. but of all the people I have met at events over the years, none of them have stuck with me quite like this one. Over the holiday period, 3 days before New Year 2010, my girlfriends and I decided to explore Seattle's nightlife. I have lived in Seattle for the last 4.5 years, but have not really investigated the city's nightlife, much to my girlfriend's annoyance. My girlfriends are fully aware of this fact, and begrudgingly, I went on the pub crawl. After hours of trudging through the cold night, visiting many bars, we finally discovered a bar in Belltown which was located down an alleyway. I don't know the name of the bar. It was dark and I wasn't attentive at this point. This was our final destination and I was relieved. I was a designated driver and I had stopped drinking several hours earlier, so I wasn't feeling the euphoria which was shared by my girlfriends. In fact, I was miserable. I remember the entryway to the bar had 2 stone steps. I stubbed my toe on one of them as I ascended the stairs, which is why I remember. The interior was dark. It was small, packed full of punters, and a very sticky floor. We managed to push our way to the bar and ordered some drinks. We stood near the bar. The place was heaving. My girlfriends had already consumed the first lot of refreshments, and they were drinking like fish, so it was the best place for us to stand. I pushed my way to the bar a second time to get the girls more drinks. Whilst I stood at the bar, I was flanked on the right by a group of men who were loud and crass, and to my left was a man probably 6 feet tall or so, with dark, short hair and wearing a gray t-shirt. I didn't pay much attention to anyone, as my focus was to attract the bartender so I could order the drinks. The man on my left spoke to me, but I couldn't decipher what I heard. I turned to look at his face, and his stare was quite piercing. I noticed he had really dark eyes, but then he was backlit, so part of his face was cast in shadow. He then touched my shoulder and said something. At first, I couldn't interpret what he was trying to say. There was too much noise, music blaring, punters talking and laughing. It sounded like a roar, until he touched my shoulder, and the noise just drifted away, similar to when one inserts earplugs to reduce noise. At first, I couldn't comprehend what happened. I think I was dazed for a minute or so, and then he started to speak again and I could hear him. He asked for my name and I provided my real name without thinking. Then he asked who my friends were. The chit-chat carried on for a couple of minutes, and then he told me he was a vampire. I scoffed at the statement, and then he showed me his teeth. His teeth were nice actually, bright and shiny, and he had slight elongated canines. I didn't believe him. I thought the teeth were glued on and thought my girlfriends must have bribed him to poke fun at me at my skeptical nature. I asked him if he liked to roleplay as a vampire and became quite persistent in questioning. He was adamant he was a vampire and got frustrated, so I asked him to prove it. He said he could bite me, but I rejected that idea. I'm not naive to think blood disorders can't be passed on through a bite. He mentioned he knew where I was from, which I thought was easy since I have a British accent, where I work, and roughly where I live now. I was astounded when he clearly stated I was from the north of England, northern coast, near Blackpool. Actually, I was born in Preston, Lancashire, which is 15 minutes from Blackpool. He stated I worked for an aerospace company and that I lived 40 minutes south of Seattle. He mentioned that I was married. The married part was obvious. I had my wedding ring on. And then he stated that I had a little girl. At this revelation, I was truly nervous. I didn't believe he was a vampire, but a stalker. He knew too much about me. I wonder how he knew I had a little girl. I was actually panicking at this stage. I quickly walked away and pushed my way back to my friends. I didn't turn around to look at him, and quickly told my friends what occurred. We left the bar within minutes. We had to talk a little as we approached the car park. My friends noticed the vampire from the bar standing next to a bus shelter. I quickly ushered my friends into the car park and got out of Seattle as fast as I could drive, hoping he didn't get a chance to see the license plate number. Over the past couple of weeks, I've been questioned a multitude of times by my friends and have been asked to inspect every single aspect of that night. The night in question, I was cold, stone sober, so I know what I saw and heard. However, I am still dubious he was a vampire, but I am not sure what he was. I was definitely astonished that he knew so much about me. I can't explain how he knew so much. I'm essentially a foreigner in this country and don't have much information spread everywhere as most U.S. citizens. It is hard to track me unless you have access to immigration databases. Anyway, this is my weird story. You can interpret this tale how you wish. I, on the other hand, have learned to be more careful about the places I visit in the future. In New York City during the late 1970s or early 80s, a man on the street got hit by a moving vehicle and thrown 30 to 40 feet into a crowded intersection. There happened to be an ambulance already there at the intersection, waiting for the light. All they had to do was open the doors and put the guy in the ambulance. They get him to the hospital, where he refused all treatment, including blood work and x-rays. He wanted to leave, but he was surrounded by hospital staff and other patients in the ER. He even refused to give his name. They put him in a private room with a nurse outside. He refused all food and water as well. An elderly couple came to visit him, carrying very heavy army duffel bags. They leave later without the duffel bags. Soon, after an ER tech came to pick up the patient for x-rays, he goes with the technician. Meanwhile, a nosy nurse went into the room to find out what was in the large duffel bags. In the bathroom, she found a number of drained blood bags on the floor. Spinning on her heels, she ran out of the room and saw a wheelchair with the orderly sitting in it, with fang holes on his neck. She screamed, and an armed security guard came running. The man flashed his fangs at the guard, and the guard opened fire. The bullets hit him, but did absolutely nothing. The man sprinted into a nearby room and jumped through the window, hitting the ground some 15 stories below, and ran off like nothing ever happened to him.
All right, my horror hounds, thank you very much for joining me this evening. And thanks to Inspector LaGrasse for helping out on this video. He's a fairly new horror channel, so go check him out and show him some love. There's a link to his channel in the description below. He's got a promising future here on the YouTube. I'd also like to give a special thank you to Mr. Sinister for narrating my intro. There is also a link to his channel in the description. Check out his velvety voiced videos and do your ears a favor. Join me next Friday at midnight for more tales to terrify, and remember, horror hounds, keep it creepy.